Welcome to Jimbo's Garage.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Jimbo's Garage. Well, here in the shop, I've done a lot of gates, and some of which have radius tops to them, and that seems to be the common go-to these days. I've been doing a lot of radius top gates, but today we're going to be doing something just a little bit different. We're going to be doing a reversed radius gate. That means the radius is not going to be going this way, it's actually going to be going this way. But there are a couple of components first before we get to build the gate. And first, I've got to build a arbor. This arbor now is going to go over the top, and that's going to be this radius, and then the gate will be the reverse radius underneath it. It's a little complicated install. I'll need to build the arbor first, get all the components together, and get it installed so I can take my hard measurements for the reversed gate that's going to go beneath it. I've had my metal supply store pre-build and pre-make my radiuses here. I've had them calculated out to the size that I need. That's something that I don't do in the shop. They're right down the street, so I have them take care of that for me. So we're off to a good start. So let's get started on today's video. All right, so like I mentioned, there's a couple aspects to this build right here. One of them is the arbor. And that's what I'm building here first. You know, these radius pieces I mentioned, I got them at my building supply, or metal supply store I should say. And I gotta say, these were a little bit pricey. Just for example, I have 3 of these pieces made. There are 2-inch square tube, 1/8 inch wall thickness, and I paid just a little over $500 for the material and the bend on those 3 pieces. However, that was what the client was willing to spend. He wants this, so we're gonna go ahead and go with it. Or you can see that I've laid out everything here for the arbor. Definitely don't want to be making any mistakes right here. And it's a little bit hard for me to get this in my Evolution cutoff saw, my 14-inch. So a better option right here is with the metal cutoff saw with a Mercer flat cutoff blade here. Put a fresh one, brand new on there, and it just cuts like butter. A couple of different angles right here. And, you know, I can't always get it just right. That's the only downfall with cutting angles on radiuses and stuff like this. It's not always perfect. I can't get them perfect. But I've got my welding table right here, and you can see that I've got the full length right here, and I've got them fastened down on the end. And I'm going to go square to one side, and I'm cutting the lengths right now for the height of this. Now this is about 4 feet wide, and it's about 80 inches tall to the peak of the arbor, and that's typical with a standard door. All right, since I got a little bit, like I said, there's a little bit of work here. You know, I have an existing block planter with a brick cap on one side, and the other side is actually going to be going into the ground. I'll be concreting that side in. I have an existing 2-inch square tube post that I had concreted in the ground several months ago on the first phase of this job, and I'm going to be attaching to that as well. These are the rungs right here that I guess you call them rungs. The arbor is about 13 inches wide, and so I'm cutting these things to length to accommodate that. And this here is the sleeve I'm working on. Like I said, it's 2-inch square tube on the outside. That's 1 3/4 on the inside, and I'm going to drop that sleeve in the existing tube that I've already got concreted in the ground. And this is the one side of it. Once I got everything nice and square, it's just time to weld things up. Most of all of these welds are going to get ground down, so I'm not too particular about how they look. I just want to get everything nice and secure. You know, one thing you want to take into consideration too on something like this, you're going to get when you put a lot of heat on one side, it's going to want to draw in a little bit or draw out, either way, whichever way it goes. And so that's the important thing. A lot of times, you know, I've got it clamped down, or I had it clamped down on the other side there. That's a good way to kind of hold it and keep that from drawing in. All right, I got that tube out of the way. That's one side. This is the second side right here. This one here is going to be a little bit shorter. This is the one that's going on top of the one side of it's going on top of the small block planter. The other side is going into the ground right here. All right, there you see I got everything clamped down. Trying to keep that from drawing in. On this whole particular project, we're going to be working off the HTP ProPulse 220 MTS. That seems to be my go-to right here for most of the projects I got going on in the shop as of late. And that works really good. It's a multi-purpose machine, MIG, TIG, and stick. And I've got it spooled with some 35 thousandths wire, and I'm using 90-10 for the gas, 90% argon, 10% CO2, and that seems to work pretty good for me. Alright, these are the spacers that I'm putting in, and this is going to separate the two pieces to create the arbor. And these pieces here, I believe, are right around 12 inches. 11 inches maybe, something like that. The overall width of the arbor is somewhere around 13.5 inches. I had to make it that wide in order to accommodate. It's hard to explain the existing planter that's in place and where everything is located. Ultimately, the goal here is for them to plant some rose vines, and the rose vines are going to grow up and over the arbor. That is something that they were looking to do, so that's the idea of this arbor. I didn't want to put them too close together or too far apart, so right around, I believe it was 12 or 13 inches apart. It seemed to be the right distance that looked about right. And you see me squaring them up on both sides. Every single one gets tacked into place and gets squared on both sides. That's going to help a little bit later on in the build, or anytime you do anything like this. As long as everything stays nice and square and flat and true, it makes things a lot easier. I'm very fortunate to have a really nice welding table that's nice and big and nice and flat, and got all that clamping ability, and it sure makes things a lot easier for fabrication. All right, well, those tacked into place. It's just trying to move this thing up, and you can see that the arbor's starting to take a little bit of shape now. It's just a matter of lining everything up. Now, I anticipated having a little tweak some things around and bend some things around. That's usually the way it works in order to make everything line up. But in this case right here, there's really not much to do. That's the beauty of trying to keep everything nice and plumb from the very beginning. And you can see that that thing fits right on there, and a very little adjustment there. It just pretty much lines right up, and I'm able to just tack it in place right where it is. Couldn't believe it. I'm just trying to double check myself with the big square, and it is staying there pretty straight. Once I got around the corner though, all I had to do, you can see there was just slightly drawn in a little bit right in about there, and I just basically just pulled it down, and everything lined up really good. All right, well, everything tacked in place and nice and square. Yeah, it's just a matter of going around and welding all these welds out, top and bottom, in and out. Now, I've mentioned this before. It's important, at least to me it is, to weld every joint all the way around. That keeps from getting any kind of moisture inside. I see a lot of people, they don't do that. A lot of these fabricators, at least on the job sites that I go to, they're only welded on one side. And they leave an open joint, and that causes pockets for rust and deterioration. At least if you weld everything all the way around, fill all the holes, all the gaps, that's going to help reduce that corrosion. All right, so I was able to get a lot of the welding done just the way it sits on the table right here. Once I got this done, I had to tip this thing up in all different angles in order to get all the welds. You don't realize how many there are until you start going. 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom, several different pieces. And you can see right here, I've got it standing up on end, and I'm able to get the inside welded out. It's pretty cool starting to see this thing come together. Like I said, this is the first part. I do have to get that installed. Putting a brand new flap disc on there. This is a Mercer trimmable, ceramic trimmable flap disc. There's nothing like a new flap disc on there. When I say trimmable, that means that these flap discs at the very end, I believe they have about a 1/2 inch that you can trim off the outer edge to get to a fresh part of the disc itself. Like me, you see most people, at least the way I see, they grind up on an angle like this. It wears the very tip of the flap disc off. That gets to that point, you can just run it on the sharp piece of metal, cut off about a 1/4 inch at a time, and you get this nice smooth paper that it is unused on the flap disc. It seems to last a lot longer that way. Like I mentioned, we are going to be grinding off a lot of these welds, keeping everything as clean as possible. This is going to be painted black, so once it gets primed and painted black, black is a great color to hide, hide any issues or high or low spots that you may have. On this radius like this, that's one thing I didn't mention, but when they do bend a square tube on a radius, it does flatten it out on one side. It's not perfectly 2 inches all the way around. Once that radius is bent, it is flattened out. All right, there it is right there. And that part of it's done. And so we are moving now on to the gate itself. And I'm taking some careful measurements right here. Now that I have it installed, I know what my target number is I'm trying to hit. And it's important that I get everything lined up and square, so I make the cuts as I need to. A little bit tricky right here. You'll see as we get moving along, there's a lot of different cuts that has to happen right here in order to make this work the way I want it to. All right, once again, brand new black Lightning cutoff wheel for Mercer. And right through there, you can see I got a lot of pencil marks on here. And there's all that for a reason. I'm going to be cutting most of it off, but you can see that right here, I'm going to run this blade along the edge of this radius, right along in here. And I want to keep that tail of the radius because when I add on the legs to this table, I want that nice smooth transition that the metal tube has. A little bit challenging. Again, making all these cuts like I'd mentioned earlier, you can't always hit it right on the money. At least I can't. If you don't have a square table or anything is not square to cut to, nothing seems to work perfect all the time. But you do the best you can with what you got. No mistakes need to be made right here. I would hate to have to pay for a replacement if I made a mistake here. And you can see that tail right there. I'm going to leave that little piece on there, and you'll see where that comes into play here in just a little bit. All right, there it is. The radius is done. I'm just going to grab a couple pieces of 2-inch square tube. A lot of the drops that I hang on to, this one happened to be just the right size. Try not to waste too much. Hang on to everything. All right, so with my table nice and square, I'm going to clamp it into place right here. and then I'm going to run this leg right square up along the other side, and I'm going to use the piece that I cut off to create the angle that I need so this thing fits up in there. And this is where it's just I couldn't get it perfect, but that's okay, we'll fix that. You see me taking my time to try to cut a radius in here. Alright, so once I slid it in, you can see I got a pretty good gap right there. This side was a little bit closer, pretty big back gap on the other side, but I'll show you how we'll fix that a little bit later on. Alright, so just everything is taking shape right here, and I'm double checking for square. I want everything to be nice and square, and I've clamped everything down, and I'm just going to tack everything in place to be sure it stays where it needs to. I like to go for one support in the center. I'm not going to go anything across. The gate is fairly short, so this is what I wanted to do, just put one right in the center. This whole gate is going to be, the outside of it anyway, is going to be covered with wood. You'll see that a little bit later on. That is the association that we're dealing with in this particular location doesn't want to see any metal to the front, so we're going to be putting a wood trim around the outside. Alright, so just bump tacking everything together right here to kind of fill the gap a little bit. Don't care about really what it looks like, it's all going to get ground down. It's just a matter of getting everything filled in at this point. Pretty good sized gap right there to try to fill. And then now is a good opportunity to weld as much as I can out with the remainder part of the frame. Alright, we're coming up on the big gap right here. Alright, so for this piece of 1/4 inch round bar stock, I just wedged it in the corner right there, and as I'm going to work my way right all the way around this thing, you can see I'm just welding that in. That filled that gap, got around the corner and pushed it down, and I'm able to fill the big gap that I created on the inside corner. And as I come up, I'm going to weld right over the top, cut this off, I'm going to pound it down, and then go ahead and fill that in right there. A little bit smaller of a gap, about 3/16 there on the top. I've got a piece of 1/8 inch flat bar stock, a 1/2 inch. Just kind of drove that in there, and that's how I filled up those big gaps. All right, now we do a little bit of grinding, and it's hard for you to see, but like I'd mentioned, the square tube is pinched down on one side, so there is a little bit of an angle that I need to try to accommodate with. You know, the 2-inch square tube on the straight part right there is a true 2, and then on this part where it's bent, it's about 1 3/4 inches, so I'm trying to feather that in a little bit. Can't really see that on the camera too much, but you're going to see me in here. Right here, I'm going in and I'm kind of filling up a gap right there that I need to try to taper out. Just adding some weld in there, so when I grind it down, it helps tapering that out a little bit smoother of a transition. Now this is the back side, so I'm going to want this. The back side is not going to have any wood on it. The front side is going to have wood, so you know, this is what would be seen from the back side, so I'm trying to make this as nice as I can, and that's why I'm taking my time on this. The front side, not so much. It's going to be covered with wood, but that's what we want this to look like, you know, somewhat really nice. A little bit of a non-woven pad to kind of smooth things up is all it really takes, and get some prime and paint on there, and that will look really nice. This was a thin gap, and I've got some 1/8 inch filler wire right here, and the same process that kind of fills that gap up nice. Otherwise, there's some really thin metal out on the very end right there, and it just has a chance to maybe burn off. Another brand new ceramic flap disc right here. Remove some serious metal. This might have been a 36 grit. And it sure doesn't take much to remove the metal with this. Alright, with all that radius stuff done and ground clean at the top, and just going to finish up the rest of the grinding. And there's the gate right there. And so now I'm going to get some hardware put on this. You know, this is just a regular door hinge. I use a lot of different hinges for different applications. You know, this is what fit the bill for this particular application. This is the look that they're looking for, a little rustic looking. And then also put the little thumb latch in there right near the top. Alright, so I got some primer on here, got some paint on it, and got everything all taken care of. And you can see I got some smaller pieces to the right there. Those are some filler pieces that I'm going to need to fill in the gaps. You'll see that a little bit later on. It's a gravity fed sprayer. Works the best for me. I got a lot of these, and I found that works the best. Alright, moving blankets. These things are so handy to have, especially if you got painted surfaces, areas you don't want to damage. This is a piece of sanded plywood right here, and you can see I'm sliding the gate frame on. This is the, I'm going to be cutting out the wood that's going to be going on the outside frame. This is a big radius that I needed to fill. I had to use this 2 foot by 4 foot piece of plywood just in order to get this 4-inch piece of wood on the front of this with the radius I needed. So I got everything all scribed out. It's just a jigsaw to cut it out. You know, this is plywood. The rest of it is going to, well, the outside frame is going to be pine, and then the slats on the inside are what was left over from this elevator shaft up a year ago. And this is the same project. I have a video on the gates that I did there, and I've got some material left over for this. This is the going on the front of the house. Those gates are on the back of the house, but the plywood here and then the wood sides, you're not going to really notice the difference. It is going to be all painted. And then this will be the pine for the outer frame. This is 1x4. My metal cut-off saw to cut these because I'm too lazy to go out to the other garage and get my wood cutting bandsaw. Whatever, it works. Alright, so here's the frame on the outside. You can see all those angles at the top. Why I did that, so it fits in and looks the best that way. At least that's the way I think. I got a quarter rounding over bit right here, and I'm going to go and round over all the edges on all the boards. That just gives it that rounded look, finished look, smooth look. You don't want any sharp edges. At least I didn't on this. You know, it's going to be hands on this gate, and you don't want any sharp pieces where you can get slivers. So it's nice to round everything over. Gives it a good feel and a good look as well. Alright, down to the last piece right here. Little palm router, does a good job. Alright, there's the slats. I'm just double checking to be sure that everything is going to fit the way I want it to fit. And I'm pre-marking these slats right here. I'm going to be cutting these, so I've marked them and numbered them 1 through 8. There'll be 4 slats on either side, and just over here to the metal cutting bandsaw. I'm just ripping these things 4 at a time here, at least on the straight cuts. You know, this wood is extremely dry, over 100 years old, that they recovered from this elevator shaft, and we're repurposing that on this. That's what the owner was looking for. I'm glad we were able to use that. All right, get everything painted black, and it's time to start putting this thing together. Again, like I said, it's a gravity feed. I get a lot of people ask me what I use and how I go about, you know, painting things. This works the best for me. I got this on Amazon. I bought like 4 of them. I've been through all kinds of different ones, but this one here works the best. I'm gonna find the model of this and maybe put it in the description if you guys are looking for it. That's pretty inexpensive. I believe they're about $50, but they clean good and they work good. As long as you keep them nice and clean, they'll work good forever. You know, when I built the original gate, people said it would have been nice to be able to leave that old rustic wood look, and I kind of agreed, but the owner, I talked to him about that, and they said no, the rest of the house is black trim, and they wanted it painted black. All right, putting things together right here. Self-tapping screws, about 1.5 inches long, with a countersink on the top is what I like to use. Even though they're self-tapping, I still assist them with the drill bit. It just makes it a lot easier there. You know, they go in a lot nicer. Not a lot of screws, just spaced about a foot apart or so, just enough to hold everything nice and tight to the frame. Just like that, everything is coming together. See right here, boom, I broke a drill bit right in half, right in the middle of the shaft. Usually sometimes when you break a bit off, it's down inside the metal, but this one snapped right in half, halfway up the shaft. Probably user error. You see that when I'm drilling a little bit of an angle. Probably doesn't help. All right, yeah, so I countersink, so I drill them, countersink them, and then drive those screws in, and then I'm just hitting it with a little bit of rattle can, same color as what I sprayed on, and that when that dries, it's going to dry in, and you won't be able to tell the difference there. All right, with that part done, I'm going to flip it over, and it's time to get the slats installed. And these were about 1.75 inches apart. I'm using 1.75 inch spacers right there. And one thing I do want to remind you guys that every 1 or 2 that you put in, whether they be pickets or wood or metal, check for square, because they do get out of square really quick and easy. And you can see this one is already starting to work its way out of square. Just double check everything. You want that reveal at the very end to look nice and square, nice and plumb. I'm just using some staples right here to hold this in on the back side of the wood frame. Those aren't brad nails, those are staples. Staples are a little bit stronger. All right, so there it is. The reverse radius gate is complete. This is a great little project. I hope you guys enjoyed watching us. It's fun doing all kinds of different gates. You know, you never do the same one twice. Don't forget to check out my website, JIMBO'Sgarage.com, for torch lead holders, apparel, shirts, hats, and miscellaneous items. Follow us on Instagram. Check us out on Facebook. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next week.
See you next time on Jimbo's Garage.